bezaubernd niedliche Blicke des Todes. Ja. Macht es. Hallo.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, everybody participating on this webinar. I hope you hear me. My name is Gábor Tőkés. I try to moderate this webinar. I spent 37 years at the Hungarian authority, and I dealt with authorization of plant protection products and fertilizers, yield enhancers. The fertilizer product regulation, the 2019 per 10.9 per EU was voted in 2019 and began to apply in the practice just 2 years ago in July 2022. The aim of this regulation was to promote the circular economy and to create rules and methods for fertilizer products harmonized in the EU member states. The regulation of registration and placing on the market of fertilizer products were very different in the member states. The fertilizer product regulation created a uniform system in the EU while maintaining the possibility for the member states to keep national legislations. This is the optional harmonization. The fertilizer product regulation is a very complex system, and it can be seen only in the practice how it will work. Therefore, the Commission got possibility to modify certain parts of the fertilizer product regulation by delegated acts. The regulation contains component material categories, the CMCs, and all components of the products must meet the condition of one or more CMC. The new delegated regulation 2024 per 1682 describes the details of CMC10 about processed manure written in the 1069 per 2009 EC regulation. The aim of this webinar is to hear detailed information and to help of better understanding of this category and the application of this new delegated regulation. We can hear the best experts of this topic. Theodora Nikolakopoulou from the European Commission, Ildikó Varga from the CER Trust, which is a notified body in Hungary, and Dorottya Lőrincz, also from CER Trust. The questions can be written in the chat box, and please notice to whom you intend to put your question. Please switch off your video and microphone. In the beginning, let me tell some words about CER Trust. It is a testing and certification LTD, a notified body for EU fertilizers according to FPR. The testing and certification scope covers all types of EU fertilizers, like organic and inorganic fertilizers, as well as biostimulants. Furthermore, all applicable acceptable component materials like waste, residues, compost, and biochar. Besides having a global clientele, their experts are internationally recognized and being actively involved in the regular meetings of the coordination group, meeting held by notified bodies. So, first, let me introduce our first presenter, Dr. Theodora Nikolakopoulou. She studied biology in the University of Athens in Greece, and she has a PhD in biological science. Working as a researcher for 15 years, she was involved in several projects dealing with environmental microbiology and with a focus on occurrence and transfer of antibiotic resistance in natural ecosystems. She joined the DG GROW of the European Commission in 2018, and since then she is responsible for the implementation and development of the fertilizing product regulation, including standardization. She is also following the development of other legislative acts relevant to the fertilizing products, such as the Animal Byproducts Regulation, waste legislations, the REACH restrictions, Nitrate Directive, and the statistic on agricultural input and output. Recently, Theodora is following the revision of the detergents, and she is responsible for the negotiations of this file with the European Parliament and the Council. So now let me hear our first presenter, Dr. Theodora Nikolakopoulou. Theodora, please.
Good morning to all. I'm very happy to be with you. I would like to thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure for the Commission colleagues to present the regulation, legislative aspects of issues that are relevant to fertilizing products in that case. So without due delay, I will share my presentation. Do you all see my presentation? Just to be up.
Yes.
Do you hear?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. As I said, as it was presented by Gabor, I am working for DigiGrow for Unit F2, dealing with bioeconomy, fertilizing products, and other chemical products, as well as cosmetics. Trying to give you a bit of the history and how animal byproducts and derived products were regulated before the FPR, I just give you a hint. Of course, you know that animal byproduct regulation has been in place for a long time. And according to the rules of the ABPR, derived products from animal byproducts could be used as components in organic fertilizers or soil improvers. And this was done by national rules. So different member states would authorize specific processes under which, and specific rules, under which these animal byproducts could be present and used as organic fertilizers or soil improvers. National products, the products that I just described, remained always under these rules, meaning that they are subject to veterinary controls, which are done by national authorities very, very frequently. Is this framework still applicable? Of course it is. It is still applicable, meaning that animal byproducts within the scope of ABPR can follow the national rules that remain applicable and be ingredients in organic fertilizers and soil improvers, which are used as such as national products on soil in agricultural practices. But then FPR came. It's about a regulation, an EU regulation following the new legislative framework, meaning that harmonized rules are set on products, on EU fertilizing products in this case, to be made available on the market, on the single market, without any additional controls or any additional strict rules by member states. They bear the CE marking. They have to be compliant with all the rules relevant to the EU fertilizing products, and then they can freely move in the European market. Gabor already mentioned that it's about an optional harmonization. This means that this is not the only option for a fertilizing product to be made available on the market. Products can be CE marked if they are fully compliant with FPR, but if that's not the case, if that's not the choice of the manufacturer, then the product can still follow national legislation and be placed on national markets as a national fertilizing product. It's a product regulation, and I would like to focus on this. It does not regulate the use of products. and I will give more details if needed later. It does not regulate the mode of application of products. So, for instance, whatever we think about rules as regards compliant products for EU fertilizing products is not restricted, or is not is a completely different framework from the nitrates directive, which, for instance, regulates the use of nitrogen and phosphorus in specific regions of EU. So this regulation that we're talking here, FPR, does not only regulate the products, have put rules for the products, for compliant products. Gabor already mentioned that this regulation is fully applicable as of July 2022 and has already been amended by different delegated regulations. We already have adopted 8 delegated acts. And as regards the link between the FPR and the ABPR, the FPR amended the animal byproducts rules, meaning that it allowed, under specific conditions, animal byproducts, or better derived products from animal byproducts, to have an endpoint in the manufacturing chain determined. So before this amendment, that was not possible. Always animal byproducts in organic fertilizers should stick to animal byproduct rules. With this amendment, when FPR came into the game, with this amendment, animal byproducts can have an endpoint determined in the manufacturing chain, and then they can be put as ingredients in fertilizing products. And if everything is, all the rules are met, and if the product is compliant, then it bears the same marking, and it's completely out of the framework of the animal byproducts rules, meaning no veterinary controls, for instance. I give you a list of the materials that are allowed as components in EU fertilizing products. I'm sure that you are aware of this big list. Different substances, plant parts, plant extracts, waste-derived materials like compost or digestate, byproducts such as food industry byproducts, polymers, microorganisms, different waste-derived materials such as struvite-like, ashes, biochar-like, or high-purity materials can be used as component materials in the EU fertilizing product. And of course, these materials have specific rules to follow, have specific requirements to comply with in order to have an EU fertilizing product. The function of the fertilizing product is also defined according to the FPR. So there are specific functions that are allowed for an EU fertilizing product. It can be a fertilizer, it can be a liming material, a soil improver, a growing medium, an inhibitor, a plant biostimulant, or a blend of fertilizing products. And just to make the link with the animal byproducts, in this slide I highlighted in green materials which can use animal byproducts are precursors. So animal byproducts may be used as an input in order to produce compost, in order to produce digestate, or in order to produce all the other materials that are highlighted in green. And of course, there are specific conditions and specific requirements that should be met. There is another case, another option also. According to CMC10, the category of component materials which is for the derived products from animal byproducts, this is the only case where materials can be used as such, or if it is defined with some post-processing, as materials, as component materials of an EU fertilizing product. And then how, in order to do some, to see some conditions. As I said, derived products from animal byproducts may be incorporated in an EU fertilizing product as long as the two conditions that you see here are met. First, we need to have an endpoint in the manufacturing chain determined. And secondly, this endpoint has to be reached before the EU fertilizing product bears the CE marking and before it starts circulating freely in the single market. The first condition is already met for some materials. So a Commission delegated regulation, if you click on the link, I will share the presentation afterwards. If you click on the link, you will see a list of materials of animal byproducts for which an endpoint in the manufacturing chain has been determined. So the Commission has worked, EFSA assessed the safety of specific materials and have concluded that an endpoint, a safe endpoint in the manufacturing chain is there if you follow specific processes. So the endpoint is determined for some materials. But now, in order to, and I'm just talking about CMC10 now, in order to be allowed for a material that have an endpoint in the manufacturing chain determined, in order for this material to be allowed in an EU fertilizing product as a CMC10 material, we have an additional step. So the Commission has to adopt delegated regulations in order to populate, in order to include these specific materials under the list of CMC10. We have already done this for one material, for processed manure. So there has been already adopted a delegated regulation with which we include processed manure in CMC10. But this is not the case for the rest of the list of the materials that have been identified and for which an endpoint in the manufacturing chain has been determined according to the previous Commission delegated regulation that I mentioned. But we're working on this. So to summarize, as I said before, there are two scenarios. Animal byproducts can be used as input materials, and I give you examples of different CMCs, different component material categories. And this can only be done if an endpoint is determined and if this endpoint is reached before the product is made available on the market. We're only talking about EU fertilizing product. The endpoint must be reached according to rules under the FPR. So even if you have a product that is fully compliant with some of the rules that are relevant for the ABPs, this ABP will never reach an endpoint at the end, so it will always be under the ABPR rules unless it is part of a fully compliant EU fertilizing product. So when we're talking about end point in the manufacturing chain, we're only talking about the incorporation of such animal byproducts in EU fertilizing products and not in other national fertilizers, which can, of course, exist in national markets, but then they have to follow national rules, as I already mentioned. In the second scenario, I already mentioned the animal byproduct may be a component material as such. We're talking about CMC10. And in that case, an endpoint has to be determined. The derived product, the animal byproduct, has to be included in the table of CMC10, and this material has to reach the endpoint before making the product available on the market, the EU fertilizing product. I already mentioned that we have included processed manure, but there are other materials that we're still working on, and there is some work yet to be done in order for them to be included under CMC10. Here is the list of the materials that have an endpoint determined in the manufacturing chain, but all the steps are not yet done to include them under CMC10. There is a technical study ongoing, which is related to these materials. The study is assessing the agronomic efficiency and, if needed, additional safety criteria. This is done by a contractor, by QLab. And the last presentation of this study was presented in the Commission expert group, and you can find it in the link. Which are the next steps as regards these materials under CMC10? There is a workshop organized by the contractor in order to present the interim report of the study. This is planned for the 18th of July. You can contact, in case you have not received yet any invitation or any communication on this, you can contact the contractor in order to get more information and participate in the workshop if you are interested. We are expecting the final report of the study in October. Based on the findings, DG GROW will start working in order to propose a delegated act for the inclusion of these materials in CMC10. And of course, we will discuss further with all stakeholders, as we always do, in meetings through the Commission Expert Group for Fertilizing Products. And of course, we will always, as we always do, we will circulate for public consultation the draft act when this is ready. One more thing before I close my presentation. What about other materials? Everything is not done. I'm sure that you have in mind other materials for which an endpoint has not been determined. So in that case, you may contact your national authorities or you may contact European associations dealing with products containing animal byproducts, and they have all the information needed in order to guide you through the whole process. The idea is that you have to prepare a relevant dossier and submit as a first step to EFSA for a full evaluation as regards the risks that may be associated with these specific materials. In my last slide, I give you links to all available resources that we have in DG GROW. And of course, we are happy to receive any technical or legal questions that you may have if you send it to the functional mailbox that you see in the last part of the slide. Many, many thanks.
Thank you very much, Theodora, for this interesting presentation. And I would like to tell now that you can put the questions anytime to the presenters in the chat box. There will be a session directly dedicated to the questions after the last presentations. So don't hesitate to ask. And if a question cannot be asked at the moment, the questions will be collected and the presenters try to answer it later in written mode. And now I would like to introduce the next speaker, Ildikó Varga, who studied plant protection and agricultural microbiology before she obtained a PhD in agricultural science in 2013. In her early career, she was participating in different biopesticide development projects as an agricultural microbiological researcher. She implemented open field trials as well as microbiological and in vitro laboratory tests in those years when she was developing microbiological and other natural originated biostimulants. According to her thoughts, sustainable agriculture practice can only be successful with high quality input materials. Therefore, in 2022, she joined Trust Ltd as an expert to contribute to the conformity procedures of organic originated EU fertilizers, especially plant biostimulants. So, Ildikó, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gabor, for the kind introduction. Could everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And do you see the small upping windows in my presentation, or you can just see the whole one? maybe the whole one. So thank you for the kind introduction. I'm sure that after this excellent presentation of Theodora, all of you understand now the legal aspect of the aim of the CMC10, as well as the legal requirement of the endpoint of animal byproducts. This is the reason why during my presentation, I rather would like to focus the legal aspect of CMC10, as well as its requirement. And I also would like to give you some insight how process manure can become and how a legal endpoint can be implemented. Okay, it's not going. Oh my God, my slides are not going. Sorry for the problem. I just skip my sharing and then share again, because for some reason my slides are not going away. Okay, so for better understanding, I collected a couple of topics to you. I think it's quite easy and better to understand the whole process if we start with the basic definition. This is the reason why I would like to talk first about the EU fertilizer, what is PFC and CMC, and I also would like to share what is manure and what is process manure. I think it's also quite important the legal endpoint and its aspect, especially the special technical steps and aspect regarding the hygienization. And I also would like to talk about the requirements of the process manure and how could it become a CMC10. Naturally, the European Commission created quite a great CMC10 amendment, and it has three main parts. The first is those processing steps which must be applied. The second, the optional further processing steps. And the third one is the other requirements, especially in labeling requirements. So this is the reason why I would like to close my presentation with a label draft of an EU fertilizer, consists of CMC10 as well. So let's just dive in. What is an EU fertilizer? So EU fertilizers are those products which are in compliance with the regulation of the FPR, and all EU fertilizer must have at least one product function category. This gives the function of the product. Naturally, a product could consist of one or more components, but all components must fit into at least one component category. For example, in this case, processed manure could fit into CMC10, and the product based on processed manure could, for example, be an organic soil improver, which is PFC3E. We have been talking a lot about manure and processed manure. I think first of all, we shall to clarify the definitions. So what is what? You will find the manure definition in the Animal Byproduct Regulation, the 1069. So manure is originated from farm animals, except farm fish, but it also contains not only excrement, but also litter, so straw and sieving sometimes can be also found in manure. I also would like to highlight that insect frost is not equal with manure, because insect frost could also contain unhatched eggs, larval skins, as well as unhatched puppets. It also could contain feeding substrates, so definitely insect frost is not the same as manure. We have been talking a lot about processed manure, so I think this is the point when we try to clarify what is processed manure and what is the difference between processed manure and between manure. I'm sure that all of you know and understand for now that animal byproducts and derived products from animal byproducts can only fall under the scope and under the umbrella of the Animal Byproduct Regulation. If we would like to remove these animal byproducts under the umbrella of this regulation, the animal byproducts must be reached its endpoint, and after reaching the endpoint, this processed manure is ready for further processing, and it can become a CMC10. This delegated regulation, the 6005, gives a bunch of requirements how can a material become a processed manure, and what is the minimum requirement for the endpoint. But first of all, I want to talk about the requirements. I rather would like to talk about in which places can be these requirements fulfilled. So where can this fulfill? First of all, this site has to have a manufacturing permit according to the Animal Byproduct Regulation, Article 24.1.f, which means that this site has to have a manufacturing permit to transform animal byproduct by composting or digestating. It is also important that this site has to be in the location of the European Union. However, manure can be originated from any member country of the European Union. As I said, the manufacturing site has to have a manufacturing permit, and when they have this permit, they can apply the hygienization step, which is the key of the endpoint. But what kind of hygienization step has to be applied? The heart of the hygienization is the so-called heat treatment, because at least for 1 hour, minimum 17 degrees Celsius heat treatment must be applied on a manure. And after that, it can be only in a processed manure when pathogen tests are being implemented. So the successful of the hygienization must be also tested. The Escherichia coli and the Enterococcus level must be tested, as well as Salmonella. However, no Salmonella can be presented in the final material, but the human pathogen, the Enterococcus level, can be approximately maximum 10 to 3rd grade. It is also important that if you keep your processed manure in this site and you don't start immediately to create CMC10, you have to store this processed manure under those circumstances when no secondary contamination or no other infection can be implemented in the material. So, for example, you can keep them in well-sealed silos as well as in sealed bags. For example, in big bags, it's also possible. So now we understand, and all of you understand, the minimum technical aspect of the hygienization. So let's see how can become an unprocessed manure to CMC10 and finally a new fertilizer. As I said earlier, the material has to reach the end point, but also the fertilizer regulation could have requirements. Not only the hygienization steps must be fulfilled, but also the post-treatments, which are listed in the CMC10 annex, must be also fulfilled, and after that the material can be used as a component of a new fertilizer. Let's talk about the minimum requirement and the minimum processing steps of CMC10. The European Commission shared these kind of steps for 3 parts. The first part was introduced because the goal of the EU fertilizer is safety as well as efficacy. And safety means, in case of CMC10, then creating those kind of materials which is totally free from seed propagules as well as weed seeds, not only from invasive weed seeds, but also all kinds of seeds. This is the reason why the Commission gives 3 different options as a treatment to prevent the germination ability and to prevent the further processing of weed seeds. The first option is that the manufacturer can sieve the processed manure on a filter having a mesh around 0.25 millimeter. This mesh size is even smaller than the smallest seed, so it's even smaller than tobacco and white mustard. So this sieving is a quite effective method to remove all kinds of weed seeds. It is also possible, instead of sieving, the application of heat treatment, but this heat treatment has to be higher than 100 degrees Celsius, or it is also possible to apply equal processing like granulation under pressure or pelletization, or it is also possible to apply some kind of drying treatments. The whole point is, and the whole aim is, to have less than 3 units per liter wheat propagules in the material, and with this you can achieve the wheat seed status. It is also possible for the justification of the wheat seed status, the application of the criteria listed under the point of compost and biogas. These are the oxygen uptake rate, the self-heating factor, as well as the biogas residue test. These tests can be applied in those cases, in all those kind of processed manure in which the organic matter is being broken. So this situation and this whole treatment can be a result in the low number of the wheat propagules, and this could ensure the wheat-free material processed manure. As I said earlier, not only must be application or must be methods are listed in the amendment, it is also so many different processing steps which can be applied, even one of them or more of them, to achieve higher agronomical value processed manure. But what are these further processing steps? So the first step and the first option is to apply those kind of methods which are listed in the CMC2 point in the fertilizer product regulation. This point is the plant part of the regulation, and different kind of methods are listed here. For example, grinding, milling, freezing, freeze drying. But the whole point is that only those kind of treatments can be applied which only resulted in mechanical differences in the final material. It is also possible to apply different kind of biological treatment in the material, and this treatment shall be resulted in nitrification of the nitrification. For example, you can use enzyme or different kind of other chemicals. It is also possible to apply mechanical separation on processed manure, and the result can be solid and liquid fraction as well. This is the point when I would like to highlight that liquid fraction is also useful, and it can also be a CMC10, because no minimal requirement is listed in the CMC10 amendment regarding the dry matter content. So liquid fraction can be also used as an element, as a component of the EU fertilizer. It is also possible to recover nutrients from processed manure, and this is also possible to act those kind of further processing methods which could result in higher availability of organic carbon in the material. But it's quite essential and important that only those kind of treatments can be applied which won't cause any difference in the material, no chemical differences or no others modification in the final processed manure. However, the European Commission give one option for chemical modification and chemical processing, but it could only result in pH modification to decrease or increase it, to give higher agronomical value, for example, prevent losing nitrogen, and have higher availability of organic carbon as well. And the last potential further processing steps is any kind of physical processing to remove water. With this, you can reach easier transporting, improve agronomical values, as well as prolong the shelf life of the processed manure. So if you would like to apply any kind of processing steps, you can apply one of them or even more of them from this list. And the other part, which is given in the CMC10 amendment, is the role of the additives. Naturally, the further listed processing steps are or sometimes needed different additives, and the Commission gave us two limitations for additives. One of them is these additives can be filled or must be filled into the CMC1 category. The CMC1 category is those category which is the so-called virgin materials and substances. In many cases, chemicals and different chemical reaction materials belong to this additive category. It also means that if you have a reaction material, it is obligation to have a REACH registration for this material, naturally when it is applicable. There is another requirement for these additives. The maximum limit of these additives can be only 5% of the weight of the processed manure, so only 5% can be added from these additives. This is the point when I would like to highlight that livable organisms are not belong to CMC10 1. So for example, if you would like to use different bacterial or fungal stains to prevent nitrogen losing or to improve the agronomical value, only CMC10 chemicals can be used. So rather use an enzyme to prevent nitrogen losing than a livable strain. And there are two quite important requirements listed in the CMC10 amendment. One of them is the polyaromatic hydrocarbons. I'm sure that all of you knows that under heat treatment of different organic materials, for example, processed manure, polyaromatic hydrocarbons can be presented and can be formed in manure and many different organic originated material. This is the reason why the European Commission gives a limit for 6 milligram per dry matter kilogram in processed manure, and you cannot exceed this limit of polyaromatic hydrocarbons. because this chemical is quite toxic and quite dangerous for soil microbes and for environmental as well. The last analytical criteria I would like to talk about is the question of pesticide residue. I'm sure that all of you know different kinds of pesticides, and these pesticides are used for integrated pest management. Aminopyrrolide and cropyrrolide is commonly used. However, so many weed and culture is sensitive for it. For example, clove, soybean, as well as different solanum species for potato is really sensitive. The interesting is that this kind of pesticides cannot decrease in the digestive system of animal. This is the reason why pesticide residue can be found in manure if the feed contains these pesticides. To prevent the further dispersation of this pesticide active agent, the European Commission asked for the indication on the label the content of this pesticide, and the maximum limit can be 50 mg per dry matter kilogram of the EU fertilizer. So if you reach the limit, or if you are above the limit, you have to put the content of the label to give information to the final user, and they can decide whether they can use this material and decide in which dosage can they use the matter. I also would like to highlight one important thing, and this is the last requirement of the CMC10, which is regarding storage. Processed manure is a biological originated material, so once it was livable material, this is the reason why we have to protect them as much as we can. So it's quite essential to protect the materials against precipitation and direct sunlight, because with this storage, we can prevent and ensure the longer shelf life of the material. I listed so many different treatments for you, but how could it look like in practice? So for example, if you buy or if you have unprocessed manure, you can apply the different hydrogenization treatment as well as the post-treatment, which are listed in the CMC10 after each other in a manufacturing site, which have a manufacturing permit according to the animal byproduct regulation. After this, you can use the component as a new fertilizer. But this is only one option. What can we do in life again? So it is not written anywhere in the regulation that these steps has to follow each other. It is also possible that the different post-processing steps may occur either before or after the hygienization. Just a fast example. For example, if you have a slurry, you can separate it for solid and liquid fraction. If you would like to work further with liquid fraction, after the centrifugation, you can sieve it with a minimum mesh size of 0.25 to prevent the weed propagation. And for example, if you like, you can apply under the sieving the minimum heat treatment to fulfill the criteria of the hygienization as well. Naturally, there are so many treatments, so many options, and so many combinations how you can fulfill in the same time the hygienization requirement as well as the post-treatment requirement. But the whole point is that all of them must be fulfilled, and after that you can create your EU fertilizer and you can use the processed manure as a CMC10 in a final product. As I promised, I would like to highlight you a label as well, because an EU fertilizer containing processed manure belonging to CMC10 has so many special requirements. I think the idea is okay when we start from the bottom, from the top of the label and we finish of the base. So the first is, naturally, if you have an EU fertilizer, you have to affix the CE marking. I would like to highlight that if you have CMC10, you can put on the market according to module B plus C. It is not mandatory to apply module D1. However, the notified body number can be affixed on the label in case of module D1. So it's quite essential that if you evaluated your product according to B plus C, please do not put the notified body number. It is also important that the European Commission has to find some kind of connection between of the nitrate directive and the manure origin in the CMC10 containing EU fertilizer. This is the reason why the declared of content must be also highlighted the organic nitrogen content of the product, not only the animal originated, but also how many % is originated from manure. And with these data, the farmers can be also fit the requirements of the fertilizer regulation, and they can calculate the dosage, which is a requirement of the nitrate directive. It is also possible to give the minimum content of phosphorus and nitrogen in the label, but it's above 0.5% only, and also in those cases when the manufacturer does not have any intention. This part has to be separated from the declared content as well. I also would like to highlight the list of ingredients part. It is quite essential if you use animal byproduct in your product to give the animal byproduct type of name on the label. I give you 2 examples in the left side. So for example, if you have compost CMC3, you have to highlight what kind of animal byproduct originated material do you use. And if you have CMC10, you also can highlight that what kind of material do you use, for example, processed manure. The next part is the recommended storage condition. I also mentioned that the storage is quite essential if you have processed manure, because it has to be protected against precipitation and direct sunlight, and it's quite beneficial to highlight this information on the label as well. If you have a new fertilizer containing CMC10, it's quite essential to give the possible air quality impact to the label. There is a special sentence which has to be put on the label regarding this air quality impact, so please don't forget to give this information as well. As I mentioned earlier, it's quite essential to give the minimum content of pesticide residue in the label. So if you have higher content than 50 micrograms aminopyrrolide and chlorpyrrolide in the kilogram dry matter of EU fertilizer, please give this information because it's quite essential to the final users. And last, I would like to highlight the contact details. It's not only related to CMC10, but it's quite important because it's always a problem to manufacturers that who is the legal manufacturer, who is the distributor, and who can be who. But I collected a couple of useful links and tips for the easier understanding. You could find more information regarding the economical operators and their responsibility in Chapter 2 of the Fertilizer Regulation. If you would like to make a technical documentation for CMC10 containing EU fertilizer, please read the requirements of the TD from the regulation. You can find it in the 4th annex. And it's quite essential and important to read at least the endpoint determination and this regulation. You will find so many useful information in the health rule regulation. I think it's quite essential to read it as well. And it's quite beneficial to read the declaration of conformity, which is in the last annex of the fertilizer regulation. That naturally, the European Commission also published a labeling guidance. You can find it on the European Commission website, and you can find so many helpful hands in this labeling guidance. I also collected the links of all these previously mentioned helping hands. So the FPR, the endpoints regulation, the health rule regulation, and the new CMC10 amendment has already a link. You can find it by yourself and read it as well. I also put here a link to the labeling guidance, and there is a newly published frequently asked question document of the FPR, so you can find so many answers in this document as well. Naturally, we will also try to answer all of your questions in the end of the webinar, but if you will remain any open question, just feel free to contact us. You can write me or any of my colleagues, and we are going to try to answer all of your questions regarding the registration as well as the conformity procedure of the CMC10. In the end of my presentation, I would like to thank you for being here. I hope we will see each other next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ildikó, for this presentation. And I tell again you that don't hesitate to put your questions. So please write into the chat, and the speakers try to answer to everybody. And now I would like to introduce our next speaker, Dorottya Lőrincz, also from CELTRAST. She has been working for CELTRAST Ltd for more than 2 years and has experiences with more than 100 assessment procedures for fertilizing products from almost all the categories that are listed in the fertilizer product regulation. She is strongly experienced in Module B and Module D1 assessment procedures as well. She knows the typical pitfalls of the most common product categories and the solutions for them as well. The Trust Ltd, as I told before, is a notified body with full scope for the FPR, which means that they are accredited for all the product function category and the component material categories and modules listed in the regulation. So, Dorottya, now the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gabor, for the introduction, and welcome to everyone. I hope you hear me and see my presentation is shared. Let me know if not. Okay, so however, using animal byproducts as an input material for CMC3 and 5 is already possible since 2023, but we thought that the picture would be whole if we give some minutes to these products as well. So quickly go through some important terms related to CE marking a product. The term of the manufacturer is essential to be clear, as Ildikó also mentioned some minutes ago. The manufacturer is that legal entity who is indicated on the label as a manufacturer. With other words, the company who puts the product on the market under his or her own name. Why this is important? Because there are responsibilities linked to the manufacturer in the FPR, and the most important responsibility is to carry out a conformity assessment procedure before CE marking an EU fertilizer. And what is a conformity assessment procedure? This is the process of proving the compliance with the requirements of the EU fertilizing regulation. So let's go through the main steps of a conformity assessment procedure. The first step shall be always to determine the CMC, component material category, of the raw materials in your product. Now, in our case, it is given because we are talking about CMC3 and 5 containing products, but please do not forget to determine it for all the other raw materials that presenting in the final product. The possible CMCs are listed in Annex 2, and after you classified your material categories, the next step is to check the requirements given for the chosen category. The criteria are also in Annex 2. In Annex 2, Part 2, Section CMC3 or 5, firstly, you will find the possible input materials of composting or digesting process. The input material can be for both categories, bio-waste or specified living or dead organisms or parts of thereof or additives. But what is the topic of my presentation? Also animal byproducts. Annex 2 says Category 2 or Category 3 animal byproducts can be used in CMC3 or 5 materials if the endpoint in the manufacturing chain has been determined in accordance with the third subparagraph of Article 5.2 of the Regulation EC 1069/2009, which is the Animal Byproduct Regulation. The referred part of the Animal Byproduct Regulation says that the Commission is empowered to adopt delegated acts to determine the endpoint in the manufacturing chain. And beyond this endpoint, the derived products referred to in this paragraph are no longer subject to the requirements of this regulation. The delegated regulation to determine the endpoints for composts and digested residues was published in May of 2023. It is the EU regulation of 2023/1605. In this regulation, there is a clear requirement about the manufacturing process shall be done in the area of the European Commission in a fertilizer plant which is approved in accordance with Article 24.1 point F of the ABP regulation. This point requires the approval of the authority of the plant for organic fertilizers and soil improvers. And the other important part of this delegated regulation is Article 3, which provides the detailed hygiene rules also for composts and also for residues of biogas plants. This point refers to the relevant parts from the regulation EU 142/2011. So if these criteria are fulfilled, the animal byproduct input material is acceptable for CMC3 and 5 categories. Going back to the FPR, in Annex 2, you can find further requirements for CMC3 and 5. For instance, you have to separate the input and output materials in the manufacturing plant and also the production lines from other lines that using other materials. There are also specific thermal conditions given for composting and thermophile temperature time profiles for digestion process that you have to fulfill during the composting or digesting process. The analytical criteria shall be also checked in Annex 2 because there are rules for polyaromatic hydrocarbons or microscopic impurities, oxygen uptake rate, and so on. After all the CMC requirements were checked in Annex 2, the second step during your conformity assessment procedure is to determine the PFC, so the product function category of your product, which can be easy in this case because only organic fertilizers or soil improvers can be chosen. But you also have to check the requirements of the chosen PFC category in Annex 1 of the FPR. In this annex, you can find the maximum limits for heavy metals or criteria of the microbial contamination or minimum nutrient contents for organic fertilizers. After you are sure about your raw materials and the products are compliant with Annex 1 and Annex 2, you can prepare the technical documentation of your product. Generally, the technical documentation shall contain all the important information of the product and raw materials which prove the compliance with the FPR. The detailed requirements are listed in Annex 4, Part 2, under Section Module D1 in Point 2. In lack of time, I would like only to highlight the most important points where there are specific requirements about the animal byproducts. The label is part of the technical documentation. It shall be prepared according to Annex 3 of the FPR. And in the case of animal byproducts, there is an additional sentence what has to be indicated on the label. About farmed animals shall not be fed in any way where these products are used, or 21 days has to be waited with that. The test reports of the analytical criteria also shall be included in the technical documentation. These reports shall prove the compliance with Annex 1 and 2 requirements. I would like to highlight also point I from the requirements that is specifically for animal byproduct containing EU fertilizers. This point requires to put in the technical documentation the commercial documents or health certificates and the evidence that the derived product have reached the endpoint in the manufacturing chain. After the technical documentation is prepared, the next main step, the fourth step, is to choose an applicable conformity assessment procedure based on Annex 4 of the FPR. In this case of CMC3 and 5, there is no choice. The manufacturer is obligated to Module D1. This module's requirement is to operate a quality management system in the EU fertilizer product manufacturing plant. About the criteria of the quality management system, you can find details in Annex 4, Part 2, Section Module D1, under Point 4 and 5. There are general requirements about production, quality control, testing, documentation handling, and so on. And for CMC 3 and 5, there are also additional requirements about the quality management system of the CMC manufacturing plant that also shall be audited. Under Module D1, the manufacturer must involve a notified body who has to certify the quality management system during an on-site audit. In the case of CMC 3 and 5, additional audits shall be carried out to check the specific requirements of these CMCs and to take samples. At CERTRUST, we know how complex procedure it is, so we are always open to cooperate during the preparational time and review the documents in advance to get ready for the on-site audit. When you are ready, our auditors carry out the audit, and in case of compliance of your certificate will be issued. As you got your certificate, the CE mark can be placed on your final packaging, and the declaration of conformity shall be issued based on the template of Annex 5 of the FPR. And this is the moment when your animal byproduct containing product has reached the end point in the manufacturing chain, and the rules of the ABP regulation are no longer applicable for your product. So shortly, this is the procedure. You can see here a summary of the legal references that you have to check during your conformity assessment procedure. Now I would like to thank you for your attention, but if you have any further question, just feel free to reach me out on any of these contacts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorottya. And now we reached the last point of this webinar, when the questions should be answered. So many questions we have, and I will tell these questions. I saw that Theodora was very diligent and already wrote some answers, but independently of this fact, I will try to read all the questions, and the relevant persons will try to answer them. If a question cannot be answered, they will be answered later. And a very important fact that, as I saw, Ildikó answered that the presentations will be available for the participants. Please confirm it. Yes? Okay. So now I try to read the questions, leaving the first questions as last because it is very long. So first question is the following. Sister working now, I am in, thank you. But can you please record the event and share the recording with me, as I have missed approximately 30 minutes. What about the recording? Maybe Ildikó can answer.
Sorry, what about it? I didn't understand the last part. Sorry, what about
the recording? So maybe the question was pointing that if it is possible to get the record of the webinar.
Yeah, I'm sure that we will publish on the same page where the registration was implemented. So everybody will get the webinar as well as the presentation. But if you have further questions, you can send us later. So our goal is to give all kind of information which we can, but I hope it will be a lot.
Yes, thank you. From the same person, I also need consultation for the animal byproducts. Can you please get back to this later to my email? Okay.
Yes.
And I think that it was answered that there is a link, as I remember. Do you want to add something about?
Yeah, sure, we will answer and we can help. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go.
Okay. Next, is the process FRAS already in the scope of the Delegated Act 2024 per 1682?
Well, actually,
So the process FRAS.
endpoint, yeah, actually the endpoint regulation is already published, and the endpoint of insect stress is published already. It doesn't mean that the requirements becoming a CMC10 would be also published, because we are still waiting. So the first step is published, the hygienization, but the second one, with which the FRAS could be a CMC10, is not published. I think Theodora also mentioned that this is an ongoing study by EFSA, but I'm sure that she will confirm this or deny. What is your opinion, Theodora?
Not on EFSA. It's a technical study that we have now ongoing. So it's the contractor who is indeed assessing, and and from my understanding, he's very well, heavily consulted EPIF, which is the association dealing with a big of interest on insect frass. So a lot of information is gathered and is assessed right now.
Okay.
Thank you. The next to Theodora, the endpoint is reached before making the EU FP available on the market. Could you please explain this?
I had put it very, very shortly in writing as well as a reply to this question, but the idea is that the endpoint has to be reached, and you have to have documentation on this in your technical documentation before you sign the EU Declaration of Conformity. So and this goes for all requirements. The manufacturer has to prove in the technical documentation that the product fulfills all the rules, it meets all the requirements. And this has to be done, of course, before the signing, the signature of the EU Declaration of Conformity. After this, the product can be CE-marked and then freely circulate in the market.
Okay, thank you. And I am afraid again to you, when will be the CMC10 Delegated Act related to animal manure officially published? And also to this question, then processed manure can only be included into CMC10 and not as CMC3 and CMC5?
I will reply the first part, and then I will leave the ladies to take over the second part, because I know that they are working on similar technical questions. So the inclusion of processed manure is already adopted, and it is published. The scrutiny period have passed. There were no objections by the Parliament and the Council, and I shared the link where you can find the published Delegated Act.
Yes, okay, thank you. Next question, again to Theodora.
No, there was another part that was not...
The other part was that then the process manual can only be included in CMC10 and not in CMC3 and CMC5?
Yep.
This was the second part.
Yeah, the answer is that no, it's not. It naturally always the decision of the manufacturer which CMC does he or she want to choose. However, if they choose CMC 3 or 5, they have to fulfill the requirements of CMC 3 and 5 as well. So if you would like to put your manure under CMC 10, you have to fulfill the requirements of 10. If you choose the other CMCs, you have to fulfill those requirements. It's always depending on the process, the chosen CMC, and the harmonization of these two.
Thank you, Ildikó. It is very logical. And a question to Theodora. Is the work on all substances shown in your list performed at the same time, or any of those substances prioritized? Also, is it possible to predict a rough timeline as to when more substances will have reached the endpoint and added to the list along with processed manure?
The study assesses all these materials in parallel. There is no prioritization. As regards the timeline, we expect the final report around October, and then immediately after the time that we receive the final report, we will start working on the draft, as we did for the processed manure. Just to make, maybe it would be good to note that it was not like the manure was prioritized. It happened that the processed manure was assessed for additional criteria by JRC. So JRC, which is a commission service, had the expertise and helped us with this assessment. We have asked JRC to assess the other materials, but the reply was negative because the colleagues did not have the expertise to do so. This is why the assessment of the additional materials was a bit delayed, as we had to open a call. It was a public procurement procedure. We had to open a call to have a tenderer, a successful contractor, and start a technical study, which is now ongoing. So there was never, in our mind, there was never a prioritization. We hoped that we would have everything in parallel. We had this additional time for the materials that are now assessed during this technical study by the contractor, as it was not possible to be done by JRC. As regards the timelines, as I said, after the final report, from my understanding, it takes at least 6 to 9 months for the Commission to follow all the internal procedures, which are different procedures. We have to discuss in the Commission expert group. We have to consult all other relevant Commission services, and then we have to open to public consultation through Have Your Say platform. So there are specific rules, there are specific processes that we always follow. And my experience says that it easily takes 6 to 9 months, but it can take longer. I cannot confirm any timeline, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much for the detailed answer. And now we will have a longer question about proteins. So the question is the following: hydrolyzed proteins from animal byproducts have been renewed as a low-risk active substance to be used in plant protection product. The same EFSA said there was no risk for the environmental, operator, and plant whatsoever. My company manufactures hydrolyzed proteins for feed without any mitigation measures. We have been marketing hydrolyzed proteins, amino acids, for fertilizing products for more than 40 years in many European countries. No safety issues at all reported. I cannot understand why hydrolyzed proteins from non-ruminant cannot be included in this regulation, considered to be keen of circular economy. There is no reason not to include this in CMC10. It is not fair for animal byproduct companies and the disadvantage in the market. So can you explain why it is not included? Thank you.
I gave shortly a reply. In the question, it was already mentioned that this is approved as a bioactive substance. So we're talking about a completely different framework. We're talking about the FPR as a regulation, and the Commission is following what the co-legislators have decided to do if you follow this specific framework. So according to the rules, according to the provisions of the FPR, an animal byproduct may have an endpoint determined. This is the responsibility of EFSA and the Ildikó were working very closely together in order to assess safe materials and then adopt delegated acts for the endpoint determination. And then only the Commission is allowed to go further, assess, if needed, additional criteria in order to include such materials under CMC10. You have to note that there is no way that FPR can amend the ABPR rules. In the FPR framework, we cannot determine additional endpoints. The only thing that we can do under the FPR rules is to assess further materials for which an endpoint has been determined and then include them in CMC10. That's the only thing that is left for the Commission to do, and that was decided by the co-legislators. This is the Commission empowerment, and we cannot go beyond. Plant byproducts regulations have different rules, and this is what you explained that you have followed in the case of PPPs. We are not in that framework.
Yes, thank you, Theodora. Now a question to Ildikó. Insect fresh can be framed under CMC10. What are the steps associated to endpoint definition for insect fresh?
Okay, so the endpoint regulation is ready, finally, and it's quite interesting because the endpoint of the insect fresh will be totally the same as processed manure. So as I mentioned in my presentation, the same hygienization steps can be or must be applied on insect fresh. However, we do not know yet what will be the further processing steps. Will be any mandatory further processing steps on insect fresh to become CMC10. We are still waiting for the consultation, as Theodora mentioned, but one is sure that the same hygienization must be applied because it's already written in the endpoint regulation.
Thank you. Next question. In relation to Annex 1.1b, the material needs to be pelletized, dried at temperatures more than 100 Celsius. Does it mean and or? I think that Theodora wrote
Yes.
this.
Yes, my training in legal drafting, although it's very poor, whenever you find in a legal text commas and then an or, you should understand or as in every comma. So it's an or.
Okay, thank you. Next, do you have to show test results to demonstrate that aminopyrrolate and clopyrrolate are below the threshold in the technical documentation? Interesting question.
Ildikó, Dori, go on.
Dorottya, if you want, you can answer, or if you like, I can as well.
Actually, I think yes, it should be, shall be in the technical documentation, all the analytical test reports about the product or the materials.
Indeed, this is my understanding as well. In case you don't want to test, you can always use this general labeling rule to inform the farmers, the users of this material, that it may may include these MRLs with an impact on their crops. So you have both options, either to identify the concrete limit, and if you are below, skip the labeling provision, skip this mandatory labeling requirement. Otherwise, you follow the general labeling and you're covered.
Yes, it is very, very clear. Thank you. The work of the expert laboratory evaluating CMC10 component agronomic efficiency and safety now doesn't cover animal byproducts that have been produced with other methods than sterilization. Why not? Animal byproducts made with method 7, milder than sterilization, are safe for animals but not for using as fertilizers. This is a serious shortcoming. So, tricky question.
I can start and then ladies can complement. So we have to think again about the framework. You can always use approved methods, approved processes, and you can always put organic fertilizers or soil improvers in national markets according to the ABPR rules. This is why that was my first or second slide, just to focus on the point that you don't have to change what you have been doing so far. FPR sets an additional framework which works in parallel. And according to this, we have to stick to the endpoints that have been determined according to the delegated act, which was prepared by DG Santé and has been recently published. So, as I said before, we cannot determine additional points under the work of the FPR because Commission is not empowered to do so. But you can always follow the safe processes that you have been using so far and do business as usual. You don't have to change anything.
Okay, great. Something about labeling. Is an expiry date required as well, or only the production date?
I gave sorry.
Sorry, Theodora. Yeah, regarding the labor requirements, the expiry dates are always related to product function categories in many cases. So we cannot say that, okay, if you have CMC10, you have to do this or that. Please check first always the product function category, and after then you can give your answer from the labeling guidance. But shortly, I can tell that in many cases, processed manure can be found in organic soil improver, and for example, in solid organic fertilizer. Neither of the mentioned PFC category asking for the giving of the expiry date, only the manufacturing date. But please check always the labeling guidance because it's product function category related requirement, not a CMC related requirement.
Yes, it's logic. Thank you, Ildikó. Are all materials obtained from post-processing considered as belonging to CMC10, including the nutrients organic carbon extracted?
I take this question as a homework because if I understand correctly, the question mentions the recovered nutrients from animal byproducts. So the first reaction would be no. CMC10 covers animal byproducts, full stop. But this is not the end of the story. We're still in the technical study, and I already made a point. I already made a note to discuss with the contractor, and always have this in mind when we discuss, in order to check whether it would be needed or how we could identify recovered nutrients or recovered materials from animal byproducts as animal byproducts per se. I take this back and thank you for this reminder.
Okay, thank you. So some questions can generate more work. So next, for producers of mushroom substrates containing manure, the spores of the mushroom are added in the production process. If I want to put this product under the FPR, should I certify the product before the mushroom spores are added, as the mushrooms are basically the plants in a growing media? Should this product can be considered with the principal herb in a container with substrate? Interesting.
I don't know what is the principal herb, apologies, but I will make a general comment. When we're talking about CE-marked EU fertilizing products, we're talking about the functions and the requirements, the rules that are specified in the regulation. So a growing medium is a material which replaces somehow the soil. So it's a material on which a plant or mushrooms can grow. But of course, we're not defining mushrooms or seeds of plants are part of the product. So I would say that I cannot imagine how a CE-marked product can already contain seeds, for instance, or can contain spores of mushrooms. But this may be, why not? You could send us this question, and then we can discuss with colleagues in DG Sante who are dealing with seeds. We had a similar question, for instance, for seeds that are covered by plant biostimulants or covered by fertilizers before they are planted. And there the conclusion was that that seed cannot be CE-marked. It's not an EU fertilizing product. It's a seed covered with a product, but you could never CE-mark a seed. So I have the impression that that would be a same approach here, but please send us this question in order to have a discussion with DG Sante colleagues and have a clear reply.
Yes, and let me ask now, continuing this, what about if the product should be registered according to the FPR and not the seed? So the product for the seed.
The product can be CE-marked, but then if, I mean, whatever you CE-mark should be compliant with the rules. You cannot act on top and do any changes. So it would be like changing the formulation of a CE-marked product, I would understand. So if you CE-mark, this is the final product, you have a technical documentation that proves that the product is compliant, and then you cannot touch it further. You cannot go and amend the formulation and still have the CE mark. But I just want to double check, as I said, my reflection on this with DG Sante colleagues. Unless, I don't know, you have probably received, Ildikó, Dora, you have received similar products for certification.
Not in this case. I rather would like to reflect the question of mushroom. So it is also possible that according to national level, the so-called mushroom compost or the mushroom substrate is put on the market. But for us, the whole manufacturing procedure is quite unknown. So I don't know what kind of other materials, for example, plant places, straw or gypsum or different chemicals will be added. And until we don't know what kind of manufacturing procedure is applied on the substrate, I don't know whether it will fit into CMC10, 3 or wherever, or could it ever capable to fit into any kind of categories, because it is so plastic that without this information, we cannot estimate. And maybe we could estimate, but it's always good to ask from the DG Sante, because these are the special aspect of the whole CMC and manure question that first rather could talk a little bit and go deeper because they're really, really special. So if somebody would like to get information regarding this special material, please send us the manufacturing procedure, and after that we can make an internal talk, and we can also ask the European Commission, Theodora, and the DG Sante as well. Yeah.
Okay, still next. What documentation will the notified bodies consider sufficient to prove compliance with the endpoint criteria? Who wants to answer it? Ildi?
Yeah, so what is the sufficient documentation? It's always important to have sufficient test for the endpoint. As I said, it is also a requirement to justify the heat treatment and the length of the treatment. And the endpoint regulation also asks the justification and the efficacy of the hygienization with the pathogen test, the Escherichia coli and the Salmonella tests. So with these two documents, it will be sufficient justification. But don't forget, you also have to justify the fulfill the CMC requirement as well. So don't focus only for the endpoint. don't forget the CMC requirement as well.
Yeah, just one additional sentence that actually the final proof is the declaration of conformity of the EU fertilizing product, because this proves that you gone through all these tests and so on.
Okay. We have got some questions during these sessions, so I will continue with these questions recently arrived. Something to Ildikó. Regarding the labeling example, it was mentioned that the content of nitrogen originating from manure must be written on the label due to the obligations in the nitrate directive. Do you know if ammonia scrubbing salts under CMC10 originating from manure will also be labeled as such, even if it marketed as an inorganic fertilizer product? According to the FPR frequently asked question, ammonia salts are not covered by the animal byproducts regulation.
Theodora, if you like, you can start with the legal background, and after that I can continue with the technical details.
Yes, indeed. And now I don't have, I mean, there are three aspects in this question. The FPR aspects, so to be compliant with all the rules according to the FPR. The ABPR rules, which might be relevant or not, and the nitrates directive. So it might be the case that off gases, for instance, were not covered by the animal byproducts rules, but until very, very recently, off gases from manure were covered by the nitrates directive, although it might seem controversial. However, the nitrates directive had been recently amended in a very fast-track procedure in order to derogate specific materials. And now I have to go back and check. I will put in the chat the link of this delegated act. So specific materials, recovered nutrients, but with specific processes from manure are derogated from the nitrates directive, which means that in that case, you don't have any link anymore with manure, so there is no need to declare this link. I will put in the chat the link. I will have a quick look, and if I manage, I can come back. But you can check. Not all recovered nutrients are covered by the derogation, but there are 3 cases of nutrients, recovered nutrients from manure, that are derogated from the scope of the definition of the manure under the nitrates directive.
Okay, anybody to this topic?
Yeah, from CMC50 specs, this is only high purity material, recovered high purity material, but there are better experts in CERTRAS than me in CMC50, so I will give definitely the word to Dori. It has to have 95% purity, and this is the reason why I don't think so that it has to have linked to the nitrate directive. But as Theodora said, CHCC will check, and I'm sure that Dori also have some kind of comments regarding this question.
Well, yeah, I think we have to go after to be sure the exact details, and we can answer it later.
All right, thank you. Okay, next. Hygienization of animal byproducts should be before digestion and composting, or can it be after this?
It can be after. So there is no order, there is no rule about the order of the processes.
Okay, clear. Next, we are a manufacturer of fertilizer with animal and plant fertilizers. We buy product that has reached the end point. Do our veterinarian must confirm the end point again? If so, by every delivery?
I have an opinion, but I'm not sure. So if somebody is buying the processed manure from a company who has a manufacturing permit implementing or making processing steps, they will have a document from the site, which is enough justification. So I don't think so that a fact which was already justified has to be justified again. So I don't think so that you have to do something 2 times because it's already reached the end point. It means that you can start the post-processing steps and you can start to make CMC10. But let's hear the other lady's opinion. Do I have right or not?
Okay, thank you, Ildi. Questions that have been sent before this webinar, will these also be answered here or do we have to put them here again? So the questions before the webinar.
Yes, Christoph, I remember your question. Maybe you are the one who has the mushroom compost, and we try to answer it if you give more details via email regarding your product.
Okay, somebody is asking about imports. It is a pretty general question. Does somebody know? Does anybody know what does it mean?
But importing of what? So
Yeah.
it should be clarified a bit more about raw materials, the product, the CMC10, or
Yeah, it's too general.
yes, but
Okay.
sorry, but if we can go back 2 questions that Ildikó answered, but she asked that if you also should
Yes.
have any comment, if
Yeah.
I would be interested in Theodora's opinion as well. I agree with Ildikó. So if the endpoint is reached, then there is a proof of it and that can be used. So after the endpoint, the BPI regulation is no more valid. So why should you prove it again? But if there are any additional thing from the side of Theodora.
I think that you might still be covered by the animal byproducts rules because it might be, everything might be done correctly, but the product reaches the end point when the EU declaration is signed. And this is why it can only be done, this material can only reach the end point when it's part of the EU fertilizing product and not a national product, which means that legally processing in a good way and be sure that the material at the end will be compliant with all the rules is not enough as regards the legal aspects. But I would like to have this also in writing to consult because it's purely legal. It doesn't have really to do with the technical aspects because the material will be safe enough, but it has to do with the exact point at which the material gets out of the legal framework of the ABPR rules. It's something similar with waste. Maybe you have done the whole work, but you have to follow waste rules. And you only get out of the waste rules when you sign the EU Declaration of Conformity, when you say that the product is fully compliant, so there is no waste anymore to discuss.
Okay, thank you, Theodora, for clarification. And now I see a very interesting question about mushrooms. Does Agaricus bisporus mushroom substrate falls under the CMC10? This is a substrate before mushroom growth, and does spend mushroom substrate fall under CMC10. This is a substrate, a vest, after the mushroom grows and picking. Today, both of these streams are seen as processed manure in my country, so I suppose both fall under CMC10. Can this be confirmed?
Yeah, the answer is the same. We can confirm it when we see the exact manufacturing scheme, and we can see whether it is in compliance with the CMC10, because this information is not enough to give 100% clear answer. Perhaps it seems yes, but we don't know yet because we haven't seen the documentation. But we will try to answer if we will see the needed documents.
Okay. Which documents are included with the exports of CMC10 products? Maybe exports to third countries? It is not clear.
Yeah. So the question should to be clarified a little bit more, because export to where and from where.
Yeah. Okay. So I go further. For Agaricus bisporus spent mushroom substrate, the producer is actually a farmer. The product spent mushroom substrate is the same for all farmers. A collector is collecting this SMS from multiple farmers. Collector buys from the farmers and collector sells the SMS to the market, who in this chain needs to follow the conformity assessment procedure if final product needs a CL label. All farmers, only the collector. Difficult.
Yes, this is the question which can be clarified after reading the chapter 2. But I also have to say that not only the question of collector and the manufacturer shall be clarified here, then the whole manufacturing procedure. So I think we shall to treat as one package question, and this is the reason why I don't want to answer only one part. First, let's see the whole manufacturing, who is the collector, and after that we can clarify all the answer in same time. Because perhaps I answer right now and I mislead with my answer because I don't know the whole puzzle and the whole subject.
Okay. We have some remarks. I don't read them, and some thanks. But we have still a question. Are there condition range such as temperature and pressure of the process conditions which would allow a manufacturing process comprising heating to be included under CMC5? Should I read again?
Yes, sorry, I just read it again.
Okay. Are there condition range such as temperature and pressure of process conditions which would allow a manufacturing process comprising heating to be included under CMC5? So it is about CMC5.
Yes, I see. But I don't understand what kind of material. So we are talking about the process where, yes, I think it's an option to have temperature and pressure conditions, but I don't really understand what is the question in it. So yes, there are conditions, but there are a lot of other conditions in CMC5.
Yes, I agree with Dorottya that this question should be more clarified.
Yeah. Actually, what I can shortly answer to this question is that Annex 2 should be reviewed for CMC5 requirements. So the requirements are detailed in Annex 2, and those points shall be fulfilled. And we need always more details if there is a so specific question about something. But Aurora can write it to us later.
Yes, so the question should be more clarified.
And maybe just complement as a general remark. In case, I mean, for CMC5 or CMC3, in case you have different rules under the determination of endpoint and the CMC itself, CMC3 or 5, then you have to verify that the stricter rules or all relevant rules, all relevant processes, the stricter processes have been followed in order to meet the high safety requirements that are put under both regulations. So if you follow a specific composting which says this kind of temperature, 55 temperature for this time of period, but you have to sterilize the manure, the processed manure at 60 degrees for an hour, then you have to make sure that your composting did have this step of 60 of 1 hour, in order to be sure that you have accomplished both sets of rules, of requirements.
Thank you, Theodora.
Maybe I would like to add small point. Don't forget that the endpoint and the requirement of the CMC10 has to fulfill before each other or after each other. But the situation is that all the aspects have to be fulfilled. And as Theodora said, it is also possible that you fulfill the hygienization requirement during composting or digestion. So it is also possible that you reach the 17 degrees Celsius under digestion, and you made the same requirement during one treatment. But don't forget the requirement of CMC3 and 5 is different than CMC10. So please read the requirements of 3 and 5 in the endpoint regulation. Read as well the requirement of the FPR regarding CMC5 and 10 and harmonize them and try to fulfill those requirements together. Maybe that is the good starting point.
Thank you, Ildikó. It is very important to regard all the CMCs which are involved. Next question still arrived, again about the veterinarians. Could you clarify if a veterinary report is needed to prove that the material has reached the endpoint to be included in CMC3 and CMC5, or any national authority report is needed?
Yes, so actually it shall be included in the technical documentation of the product. It was also during the slides where it was listed what kind of commercial documents or health certificates shall be included in the technical documentation for these materials.
Okay.
I also would like to add some notes to Doris' answer. If you have a composting site, for example, using manure, the starting point is the same as you make CMC10. So the composting site has to have a manufacturing permit for transforming animal byproduct. And these kind of manufacturing permits are always signed by the National Veterinary Service. And in this manufacturing permit, in many cases, you can find what kind of treatments are applied for hygienization, and maybe it could be a good evidence. But also during the composting or digestion method, there are so many evidences collected by the notified body, how they can reach the endpoint, how they can fulfill the heat treatment requirements and the human pathogen test requirements. So yes, sometimes we get results from veterinary service, but it's rather a manufacturing permit and test than other further requirement during the procedure.
Okay. The last question is not seem to me a real question, only some addition. And my question is to Ildikó, if we should turn back to the first question, which was a very long one. If yes,
Okay.
I will read it.
So the super first question during the whole.
The super first question before the webinar.
Has the webinar already started? Sorry, it was just a joke.
I didn't want to start with that. So
what is the status?
What is the status of a fertilizing product containing manure having reached the endpoint under the FPR? According to 1069/2009, Article 5, the animal byproduct regulation shouldn't be applicable anymore meaning no commercial documentation, health certificate, or traces. According to the national government, the addition of manure and digestate to FPR is an attempt from Europe to harmonize legislation. However, it doesn't cover everything. Elaboration, the manure law of, for example, Flanders and the Netherlands, doesn't recognize the status of having reached the endpoint of animal byproducts. For these local governments, it is still a requirement to do a VDM or Mestbank and gift notification of transport quantity and such. It is unclear how this should be applied on EU level. Is traces still a requirement even though it should not? Will this change? Is there still an advantage of having your product FPR certified? Are the talks to remove the requirement of notification of transport for products containing manure, digestate, or compost that have been registered under FPR on all levels? So it is a pretty complicated question.
Since it is rather a conflict of interest among national regulation and the FPR, I first give the words to Theodora, because I think it's way beyond the scope of a notified body. So Theodora, if you can try to answer.
I will. I mean, I will not try. I mean, if a specific rule and a specific endpoint has been determined for specific rules, then I cannot see why national authorities will not accept and request different things. But again, I would like to see this. I would like to see this in writing with more information, because I have the impression that there are a lot of different topics mixed together. Yeah. Please send us this technical question and we take it further.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank
it is
you.
too complicated and it should be turned back to this question later. You can write to the speakers. You will get the presentations and you can find the necessary emails as well. And we have still one question. What about blood hydrolysates? Will them be included in the CMC10 list soon? So blood. Who knows it? Maybe Theodora has some information about blood hydrolysates.
I cannot. I have to. I mean, if you look into the delegated act, you will see. I don't know by heart the characterization of the different hydrolysates that are covered. We could check, but you could always check. For the moment, we're not including anything more apart from what is covered by the study. I will look again in the study, but I don't remember by heart.
Yeah, okay, thanks. It is still to be clarified later. Oh, okay, as I see, we reached the last question. And now my task is only to thank for the speakers, to thank especially to Theodora for turning this time to inform people here in the webinar. Thanks for Ildikó and Dorottya for organizing this very, very useful meeting. And as we told already, you will have the possibility to reach the speakers and they will be happy to answer your questions. And some questions which could not be clarified here can be clarified later in writing. So I don't know if anybody has something to add. If not, thank you very much for organizing and for participating for all. And turn back in writing to the relevant person, to the speakers. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.